our rector at the second staff assembly of this year. We gather in person, and there are all colleagues from different campuses joining us online as well. Before I proceed, I just want to indicate that we will have interpreting services available, and I call on colleague Edouard Kok to briefly explain how we will services. Edouard.
Plus pur que ton souffle si doux.
Korsika Kudu, Professor Koopman. Hello, Mulwani. As you've heard by now, hopefully, multilingualism is one of the core values at the University of Stellenbosch, and to that end, we've made interpreting services available to English, Afrikaans, and isiXhosa. If you would like to make use of that service and be furnished with one of these very stylish stethoscopes, please do so by indicating and raising your hand or raising the roof, and we'll furnish you with these. Fantastic. If at any point you also would like to make... You are also welcome to, through the course, to come and fetch one down there where we're sitting as well, if you'd like to.
Okay. Thank you, Edouard, for that energizing contribution. Colleagues, when we walked here, it was great when colleague Peter Kirsten says, I love the assemblies. I thought, yes. And he then said, now I can see who all my colleagues are. So let's use this opportunity also to commune and to make sure that we get to know each other's optimally. Colleagues, let's observe a moment of silence. I don't think that was prearranged, but it is appropriate. A moment of silence. We rushed in here, and let's give our souls opportunity to catch up with the bodies. On a serious note, in observing a moment of silence, we think of colleagues who passed on, students. We think of colleagues who lost loved ones, colleagues who are sick, colleagues who face various challenges. Let's be silent for a moment. Thank you. Colleagues, we will, as you see on the program there, have various presentations. I will not every time introduce the next speaker, but we will start, as always, with our rector, Prof. de Villiers. Thereafter, we will have our COO, Prof. Sten du Plessis, speaking about the budget. And we're very glad that colleague Aslam Fattar, head of Kirkor, will give to you an update on the Kirkor process. And lastly, the chair of the Stellenbosch University Retirement Fund, Prof. Neil Krieger, will speak, and I immediately say more about him. Prof. Krieger is today here in his capacity as chairperson of the SU Retirement Fund. He spent 30 years in the financial services industry. He was managing director of Momentum Life, a large life assurer listed on the JSE from 1989 to 95, and executive deputy chairperson from 95 to 2003. He became an academic in 2003 and served as professor in investment management at Stellenbosch University until 2019. He sits on the board of trustees of a number of large retirement funds. He's a trustee also of the Stellenbosch University Trust and is a member of the investment committee of Stellenbosch University. He obtained his M.Com degree at SU in 1973 and became a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries in London in 1977. Colleagues, we really are glad that somebody with this profile and also with this commitment leads our Stellenbosch University retirement fund, and we will give opportunity to him as well. May I just say, after the presentations, we'll have opportunity for some questions. We have different categories of questions. We received some already prior to the meeting, and we'll attend to that. And then we'll take from the floor, and then also, if you want to put a question electronically, you can send it to this email address, ecoms, I repeat, ecoms, ECOMMS, @sun.ac.za. Without further ado, I call on Prof. Wim de Villiers. Let's welcome Prof. de Villiers.
Thank you very much, Prof. Nico, and welcome to you all this afternoon. A beautiful day out there. Maybe summer is finally here, although I won't hold my breath. I'm going to speak about, for 10 minutes, let me just set my watch here, for 10 minutes on 4 things, and that's broadening access, growing research and becoming a reliable research partner, enhancing our international standing, and increasing philanthropic funding. So these are the 4 things that I just want to briefly discuss with you all. And firstly, I'm going to show you this slide, which speaks to the number of undergraduates that we have at Stellenbosch University. And that is, so we have, and this is data from June the 30th. So we have 33,000 students currently enrolled. 2/3 of them are undergraduates, and this shows the diversity of our undergraduate students and the progression since 2016, where you can see an ever-increasing number of CBIA students in our undergraduate enrollment group from 2016 to 2023. And you can see a similar snapshot in June of the postgraduate enrollments by population group. So you can see we have more CBIA postgraduate students enrolled than white students, and you can also see the progression since 2016 to 2023. So these are the enrollments. So 1/3 of our students are postgraduate, 2/3 are undergraduate, and if we look at our graduation data, it really reflects this as well over the last number of years, so increasingly so. So, as you know, we're busy with a large system change program in the form of Sun Student, and our registrar is certainly, she's got a few more gray hairs as a result of that, let's put it that way. But if you look at the number of undergraduate applicants by population group, and again, from 2017 to now 2024, and you can see the undergraduate applicants for, and how many can we, what's our cap? Our cap is around about 5,600. This year, we admitted 6,200. So you can see from in 2021, we had about 23,000 applicants, and that increased to 55,000 in 2022. And really now, for the 2024 intake, it's more than 88,000, and I think it's actually 100,000. We've hit 100,000, and that is actually the norm. It's not unusual for many of the larger South African universities, such as University of Johannesburg. But I think increasingly what you can see is Stellenbosch has made the transition from being a regional university to very much being a national asset, and it's a jewel in the crown in the higher education South African landscape. So these are we're broadening our access, but we also, obviously, we are putting a lot of emphasis on ensuring success. In terms of research, and as a research-intensive university, we now have 68 research chairs. We have made an increased our number of postdoctoral scholars from 100 20 or so, more than 10 years ago, to now almost 400, and I would very much love to increase this to 600 in the next 2 years. But we've recently received some good news in terms of extension of funding for SARCHI chairs in these various areas and with these various researchers in mathematical and theoretical physical biosciences, animal tuberculosis, biomarkers in tuberculosis, food, environment, nutrition and health, mycobactomics, health and rehabilitation sciences. And we've also gained a new research chair in urban law and sustainability governance, and that was established with the financial support of the SU Law Trust. So we increase our number of research chairs and our involvement in research-intensive work, and this chair is now filled by Professor Anel du Plessis in the Department of Mercantile Law. We also we also established chairs in green energy, 2 of those, one in Afrikaans creative writing, and also the Gijs Steyn in financial regulation was established in the Faculty of Law through a very generous donation from the Steyn family. So this shows the number of researchers. These are the rated researchers as they are rated by the National Research Foundation. So we have 504 rated researchers. This is the most ever. And also, as you can see on the left-hand side there, we now have the most ever A-rated. That's the top-notch rated researchers, A-rated researchers. We now have 21 A-rated researchers. But I think what's very gratifying to me especially is the large number of Y-rated researchers as well. And these are the so-called young and upcoming researchers. And that bodes very well for the future of a research-intensive university. Research cannot be done in isolation. It needs to be done in a multidisciplinary, cross-faculty type environment where we address the complex issues of our time. And so that is why internationalization is so important. And it's really very clearly evident now, since we've established the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking and the School for Climate Studies, both of which are multidisciplinary, that we're really benefiting from these international collaborations. So since 2015, we've very deliberately joined prestigious formal international networks such as the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate, the Consortiums of Universities on Global Health, African Research Universities Alliance, and the European Guild of Research-Intensive Universities, as well as Venice International University. And that has resulted in a number of partner institutions abroad participating in our dual degree programs and split site degree offerings. That's growing each year. So we now have more than 40 of these partnerships with overseas institutions that offer so-called split site degrees or dual degree programs, and we have a number of PhDs that have already been delivered in these regard. So that is an example of what that has resulted in is very significant research funding that has been granted to these schools, and also a more recent development is the clusters of research excellence which were established as a joint venture between the African Research Universities Alliance and the Guild of European Universities. And that's based on the innovation agenda of both the AU and the EU. And the EU has committed to significant funding to sub-Saharan research efforts. And so through a competitive proposal, competitive process, Stellenbosch University applied to lead or co-lead some of these areas that will feature. So imagine, so Africa has a hub and spoke model, and the European Guild, they have a hub and spoke model, and then these two areas will collaborate very closely. So for example, we were successful actually in 5 areas. The first is genomics, genomics for health in Africa, and that's linked to CERI and the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking with Professor Tulio de Oliveira leading. Multimorbidity, it's linked to SESIMA. Lead there is Dr. Kari van Skalkwyk. Nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation and mitigation. So that's very closely linked to the School for Climate Studies, Professor Guy Midgley. And artificial intelligence, data science, and theoretical and computational thinking, that's linked to the NITHEX. And the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking, that's Professor Francesco Petruccioni and also Professor Kanshu Rajaratnam. And then we also have the Center for Renewable Energy, led by Professor Neil Goosen. So the point is, this is how we really leverage and this is how we magnify what we do, not only nationally with local relevance, regional impact, but we're globally competitive. And this is what has really resulted to us shooting up in the rankings, as you saw recently in the QS rankings, where we shot up by 171 spots. And it was specifically because our research, as produced by you all here at Stellenbosch University, is now enjoying significant international recognition. So it's impact of the research that is really being rewarded. But of course, this is financially, it's not an easy time for us as an institution and also as universities of higher education. And this is a very sobering slide in a sense, because it shows the income from research and NRF grants. And you can see that it has certainly increased over the last period of time. But look at that figure in 2016. That was the height of the NRF funding. So 367 million at the bottom there. And that has decreased to now 213 million. So how did we pivot as a result of that? So as a result of that, we grew our internationalization strategy. And so this has resulted from that the majority of our research funding is now coming from international agencies. So that would be from the NIH, be from Wellcome Trust, it would be from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the EU, et cetera, et cetera. So and that is why I really congratulate Prof. Moyo and DRD also on the work that they do in encouraging our academics to apply for international funding. But Prof. Stan is going to talk to you about the first and second stream income. This is third stream income, and another very deliberate focus of mine has been since my tenure started, fundraising, is growing our philanthropic culture. This is, if you look at the funds that were raised by DAR, by the Department of Alumni and Development and Alumni Relations, which I've no doubt that they're the best in the country under the leadership of Karen Bruins. So you can see here under the 2001-2007, that was Professor Brink, 2007 to 2014, Professor Botman, and then since 2015 when I started, this has been the focus also of DAR, and it's a very, very deliberate focus to raise these funds. What are these funds used for? So here in this pie chart, you see that 36% of the funds are used for student support, not because NSFAS takes care of those students who fall in a certain bracket, but we know those students also need gap funding. It's missing middle students. It's to pick up on that shortfall in postgraduate bursaries, and it's also wraparound support to ensure our students are also successful. And then you see the distribution in terms of research, in chairs and learning and teaching, etc. But you see that if you look at the pie chart, that the majority of this is for student support and for social impact and social justice, because we're a university in service of society. So I've just come back from Japan, and you may have noticed that we've got a lot of PR on our choir being invited by a Japanese philanthropist, Dr. Hiso Handa, he had a sports summit, and he'd heard that we have the best amateur choir in the world, and so he flew over 50 of our choir members to Tokyo. They were absolutely fantastic. I was just a mere hanger-on, but I did get the opportunity to meet with Prince Harry there in Tokyo, and his interaction, he was blown over by the choir, and they really loved interacting with him as well. And as you can see here, I also look pretty pleased at being on the same panel as Prince Harry. But I need to tell you, the person next to me, so I come from a very female-dominated family, and they were much more impressed at the person standing to the right of me, who is Nacho Figueras. And Nacho Figueras is an Argentine. He's the #1 polo player in the world. He's like the David Beckham of polo. But what I did not know, and that's what impressed my family, is that he's a Ralph Lauren model. Okay, but thank you all, folks.
Colleagues, thank you very much for coming this afternoon. And the Rector mentioned that I'm going to talk to you about the budget, and some of you may already have heard some of the discussions by the Minister of Finance in recent days, and I believe it was covered in the press over the last couple of days. So you're aware of the fact that our government is under financial pressure, and we're a public university. And so you can expect that as a derivative of the financial pressure on government, there will be a cascading pressure on all public institutions, including universities. But we can deal with it. Colleagues, I've often quoted to my colleagues the words of Herb Kelleher, who was the CEO of Southwest Airline, a very legendary figure in the world of the airline industry at the time at which the airline industry decentralized and was deregulated, so about 40 years ago. And many airlines internationally went under in this period, and Southwest Airlines thrived in that period in exactly the same harsh external circumstances that brought under some of the most well-known names in the world of aviation. And here's what Herb Kelleher said. He said, when a calamitous event clobbers an industry or the overall economy, companies fall into one of three categories: those that pull ahead, those that fall behind, and those that die. The disruption itself does not determine your category. You do. Colleagues, I really believe we've got agency in this. I really believe we as a university have the kind of resilience that we can cope with this problem. It is by no means an insurmountable difficulty, but what is required from us is to work proactively and to work quickly so that we can position ourselves for the difficulties that we can foresee. If we do that, then we will keep on thriving, as the Rector has already shown to us that we are significantly thriving currently as a university. And that really is the agenda here, colleagues. It is to ensure that we remain a thriving and a successful university, because that's the best way for us to serve our society. Now, I'm going to start with a discussion of the budget model very briefly, and I know it is an acquired taste which not everybody has acquired, but it may be helpful if I give a brief diagram of the university's budget model so that you can see where the pressures are and how we need to address them. So I'm going to discuss the budget model, and first I mentioned to you the framework against which you must understand our budget model. So we've adopted what is called a responsibility center management model in the university. So everybody, our colleagues in all of the faculties and in all of the past divisions, each of them fall in one of our responsibility centers. Every faculty is a responsibility center, and every DVC and myself heads a responsibility center on the past side of the university. So 16 responsibility centers in total within the university. We devolve considerable responsibility and autonomy to the management of these responsibility centers, and we give considerable scope for arranging resources within these responsibility centers. But ultimately, there is only one university, and we serve only one vision and one strategy. So whilst we have 16 responsibility centers, we are all tied together in what we call a matrix structure. And I'm going to show you how interlinked we are in a moment in a diagram. So let me introduce the background to the diagram. So the university has sources of revenue. The rector has already introduced them. We receive subsidy from government. We receive student fees. Those are our first two income streams. Then we have a large income stream that we call research grants. And then we have commercial income. We have the fourth income stream. Those are the donations that we've just heard about. We have accommodation fees as well for our accommodation budget. So these are the sources of revenue. Those are received by different units, and I'm going to introduce them. And they are allocated within our budget model to decision makers within the university, and I'll tell you which decision makers they are allocated to. And then I'm going to tell you which costs those decision makers are responsible for. So I'm going to say this right at the start. We have one university, and all of the income is the university's income. So in such an integrated system, it is impossible to say that a particular 100,000 rand is the 100,000 rand earned by the Department of Economics. There are no such 100,000 rands in the, there are only the 100,000 rands that is earned by all of us jointly. At the same time, we are all together responsible for all the costs of the university. What the budget model does is to allocate these revenues and these costs in a systematic and in a transparent way. But you shouldn't derive from that the idea that these costs are the costs of only one unit, or the revenues of a particular unit. And then finally, I'm going to tell you where our capital costs in the university are funded. So let me start with the revenue streams. We receive the first and the second income stream, subsidy and student fees. Then we have a large portfolio of research grants. We receive commercial income as well as accommodation fees, and all of this is received by the university. And then we receive donations, and we're delighted that our colleagues in DAR and the rector have worked very hard on that front. Those donations are typically not allocated to the budget of the university because we don't have a culture in this country of donating to OpEx for a university. Almost all of our donations are what we call restricted donations. So they go to the balance sheet of the university, and that's received either by the university trust or by the university's own balance sheet. And that's why you see it treated separately on the right-hand side of my slide. These funds are allocated to faculties. That's the first and second income stream. All of it is allocated to faculties. The research grants are all activities within the faculties. Our colleagues in Innovis and in Suncom generate the commercial activity. That's where those funds are allocated. And the colleagues in Suncom are responsible for the entire housing budget, and that's why the housing fees are allocated to Suncom. Of course, the donations are allocated to our investment portfolio within the university and in the trust. And now we have to allocate these costs. And you will see that the costs, that is to say our academic and research activities, you will see them on the left-hand side of my slide. And the cost of providing our teaching and learning programs, as well as our research activities, they are allocated to the faculties. The faculties who have received all of the main budget income also carry the costs for the support services in the university, although Innovis carries a part of the support services from commercial income, and Innovis also provides support to the research portfolio of the university from commercial income. And then the institutional budget, or the institutional costs, that's, for example, our Microsoft license. We have to pay that. It's our electricity bill. We have to pay the electricity bill. These things are allocated to the faculties where we have already allocated all of the main budget income, except for a small part, that is the colleagues, the division that the rector mentioned, that is development and alumni relations. Their costs are borne by the SU Trust. And that's why you'll see a yellow line going to the right-hand side of my sketch. The accommodation budget costs are all of it allocated to Suncom because we have a ring-fenced accommodation budget as is required by regulation. And then finally, our student support is provided both by the main budget. You'll see a blue line going all the way around the bottom of the slide to the faculties, as well as by Suncom, because part of our student services are provided within the student communities within the housing budget. So this is the allocation, colleagues, of what we call the integrated budget of the university, all 5 of our income streams. The difficulty I'm going to explain to you arises in a subsection of this budget. That is the main budget, which is the part that's funded on the left-hand side of this slide by the first and the second income stream, by government subsidy and by student fees. So the activities directly funded by that faces a risk next year, and I'm going to unpack that risk in a moment. Before I get there, just the final point. You've seen that you've been on campus the last couple of years and have seen the significant upgrading of buildings that had previously fallen behind their maintenance cycle in what we call the Campus Renewal Project. We fund that from our balance sheet, from the investment income on our investment portfolio. So those funds do not come from the main budget. And let me give you the orders of magnitude. The integrated budget of the university is about 7 billion rand this year. The capital budget is about 350 million rand. So the capital budget is 1/20th the size of the integrated budget of the university. And it is not funded from the same source. It is funded from the investment income on our portfolio. Now to the reality that we face. We have received information from the Department of Higher Education and Training, and they received information from National Treasury that the medium-term expenditure framework from government is under pressure, that government is unlikely to be able to meet its medium-term commitments from a financial perspective. And we have been told that that first income stream, government subsidy, in the case of all public universities, is unlikely to grow. So we have been told that the department will try to protect at least the level. There will be no increase in the level, and they hope that they won't have to cut what we call our block subsidy. Some of our grants will be cut, our earmarked grants, except for the foundation grant. So that is a sectoral impact. Colleagues, it has nothing specifically to do with Stellenbosch University, but the impact on our budget is large because it affects 2 to 2.5 billion rand of that 7 billion rand that I mentioned to you. There's also tremendous pressure on NSFAS. So government allocates more to the NSFAS bursary scheme than to the universities, and that is under tremendous pressure. NSFAS, the government is trying to protect the NSFAS budget, but even that is under pressure. And we have been told that there will be a revision of some of the cuts that have been announced to NSFAS allocation this last year, to the housing cap and to the food allowance cap, but we've received no guarantees about what those revisions will entail. So, colleagues, this is the background to the difficulty in the first 2 income streams. The impact on our budget is as follows. First, we still have to budget for load shedding. That is approximately 70 million rand next year. On that yellow block in the middle of my slide, that institutional block, we simply have to pay it. We have to keep the lights on. Then the freezing of the subsidy, whilst our costs are going up at the average rate of inflation, will cost us another 70 million. And then we will face a smaller penalty. We're not quite sure how big it is, but we approximate the order of about 7 million rand because we had under-enrolled students 2 years ago. There's a long lag in these calculations. And we might face a penalty because of under-enrollment at the university. Because that's a once-off, it's not on a carry-through basis, but it will nevertheless have an impact next year. So that we face a potential negative impact on the main budget part of the university of 156 billion, or let's round it to 156 million. Let's call it 150 million. And the reason it's serious is, colleagues, is that we are not allowed to have any deficits on our main budget. So we must submit both a balanced main and integrated budget to the department, both for next year as well as over a 6-year planning horizon. So we have to solve this problem. Now, how will we solve this? The magnitude is as follows. That projected deficit is about 4% of the main budget of the university. And so we have to find ways of addressing that 4% gap. And it isn't responsible for us to ignore the problem until November when Council has to approve the budget. So I've asked the responsibility center heads, all of the deans as well as the DVCs, to help me prioritize activities now. We have to find a reprioritization of activities across the university so that we can prepare for that 4% impact on the main budget of the university. Now, I'm not suggesting that you find unimportant activities. I know that you are not doing unimportant things. What I'm asking the university is to prioritize, to find the more and the lesser important of the activities that we do in the university, and especially relative to the university's strategic objectives. We need to focus on where the university is heading and say those are the activities that we are going to prioritize in a tough budgeting season. So we require this 4% reduction in the main budget in costs on a carry-through basis. In other words, permanently reduce those costs. And if your intuition is that there's an alternative that we can grow income, you're absolutely right. That is, of course, an outstanding idea. And I've also asked the responsibility center heads to give us realistic ideas for how we can grow income as opposed to cutting costs. But there are limits within the main budget. The main budget is a particularly rigid income stream. We're not allowed simply to grow our student numbers. So there's not easy scope within the main budget to grow income. But where there is, we will certainly welcome that. And especially where it's possible to shift costs from the main budget to the third or the fourth or the fifth income stream. That is, of course, a highly realistic way to respond to these difficulties, because the difficulties lie on the main budget. And so I've asked all the responsibility centers to submit to me this week their prioritization of potential reductions or potential shifts to the other income streams, so that, colleagues, we can plan well in advance of Council's budget decision in November how we are going to deal with this difficulty. And I say it again, colleagues, there is no reason why we won't be able to do this. We certainly have the capacity to do it. We are a university that is well managed across the board, and in such a well managed university, it is possible for us, if we have the will to solve this problem, to address this undoubtedly uncomfortable budget situation and nevertheless come out thriving. I want to echo the words of Professor Guy Mitchley, the director of our School for Climate Studies, who said we want to avoid what he calls simply an austerity cycle. That's not the idea. The idea is not to just squeeze the university. The idea is to reprioritize in such a way that we thrive in the right direction. I'm going to stop there, Rector, and hand over to Professor Koopman.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Rectorate and colleagues. I'm going to make only a couple of remarks, because I'd like to understand whether you have one or two questions later on. Firstly, the Kirkor Committee, whom you may already have heard about, seen us in action and so on and so forth, is a very audacious attempt by this university to productively interact and have a conversation with the kind of dynamics and dimensions that you've been exposed to in the previous two slides. In the first, the rector really outlined the world-class nature of this institution, and in the second, Professor Stan was able to illustrate some of the challenges in very challenging times. We, as an institution, are transforming apropos the spirit of the Gampepe report,
we have made certain analyses, certain findings, and certain recommendations about addressing racial and other discriminatory acts in this university. It is audacious because we are operating across 5 different dimensions over a 2-year period, which will deliver short-term proposals, examples of which I'm going to give you in a second, medium and longer-term proposals, and fundamentally reposition the transformation of the institution on a very concerted, integrated footing over the next 10 years, at least that's the hope. Part of the dimensions is, 1, that we have set up 5 work streams, and you may know the first work stream is on students, second one on curriculum, the third one on institutional culture, the fourth one on categorization, and the fifth one, categorization and science, and the fifth one on the strategic alignment of the university's policies, procedures, and so on and so forth. So the way in which we are currently conceptualizing it is that these transformation objectives of the university in response to the Campepe report will operate across these 5 dimensions. These 5 dimensions will interact with each other, but we have streamlined them into distinctive work streams because we feel in that way we're more concertedly able to respond to the Campepe report on the one hand, and on the other hand, to develop the integration in a much more deliberative, open-ended kind of a way. That's the work streams. Over the last 3-4 weeks, 2 months, we've set up the infrastructure for this process. So we've developed terms of references, action plans, deliberations, research remits, mobilization of data and information to do what? To allow us to understand our institutional culture and operations in a new way. And we've come to a number of conclusions already, one of which is that this university is doing an inordinate number of transformational activities across its operations, right across. Right? So for example, in the curriculum work stream, we've come to an understanding very quickly that there are all these critical humanities curricular offerings all across the 10 faculties, as well as in the co-curricular space. So what we are doing is that is the platform from which we develop a much more cohesive, holistic, uniform approach to understanding the curriculum in this university for critical citizenship and inclusive functioning in this university. That's just one example. We are now moving into the business phase of the KIRCOR process. And that is where we are generating conceptualizations and proposals and recommendations, which we are going to, from October, take onto campus, into the various campus spaces, into the 10 faculties, on the 5 campuses, in the various past environments, in the various faculty and teaching departmental environments, through a cross-cut of dialogue and consultation discussions, where in the first instance from October, we are going to ask you to tell us what the problem is, how to understand that problem, and how to fix that problem in the institution. So it is fundamentally listening. And that will then be followed by the substantive dialogue discussion around actual proposals. Final point that I want to make is that this is essentially, so the logic of this will work, the KIRCOR process works, work stream process works, deliberate, generate understanding, scholarly development, scholarly debates, and recommendations. These recommendations are posited in the dialogue and consultation spaces. The dialogue and consultation spaces will then speak back to the work streams. The work streams will firm up the proposals, and then these proposals will be provided and put to the rectorate for implementation. Remember, the KIRCOR process is a rector process led by the rector himself, right? So implementation flows from that. So some of the, finally, some of the short-term proposals that's already on the table that we will be developing, hopefully for implementation, is in the area of, we are developing what is called a practice note to develop a much more cohesive, rapid, and integrated response to incidents of discrimination that may emerge in any environment, student or staff in the university. We think that the Campepe report is saying to us that our approaches are too slow, often too siloed and unintegrated, and so on. And so we have developed a way of utilizing all our resources and all our policies and all our infrastructure to respond quickly. Because it's to efficient responses that you accord justice. But we also have to make sure that justice is seen to be done through the processes that we establish for itself and so on. So that is one of the examples. Another example is a lot of staff developmental training. We have to be careful not to oversaturate that particular space. But we're suggesting that staff should become engaged in critical humanities-orientated educational process interactively, engaging with each other about what it means to live in an inclusive university and what it means to live non-discriminatorily and in relation to the Constitution. The final one, there are a couple of others that I could mention, is that just yesterday, in the workstream process of Workstream 5, which looks at the strategic alignment of the organization to transformation, a beautiful discussion at the end of which the chairman summarized that we will put on the 5th of September a proposal to the rector, and I'm putting it now publicly, so I'll put it again on the 5th, that all the policies that are being developed currently on campus, because there is a policy review and policies are being developed, must be informed by the logic and the focus of the Hampepe process, so that there is that permeability and streamlined interaction about the kind of policies that we are developing in this particular space. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share a few of the highlights of your retirement fund with you. There's a summary of what I'm going to discuss this afternoon. The main highlights will be focusing on investments on the one hand, and on the proposed two-part system which will be introduced by government next year. So to start off, just a summary of who are the trustees. You will notice that there is a wide plethora of investment skills, human resources skills, legal skills, finance skills, which cover all the bases which we require to run a retirement fund effectively. I may also add to that, ladies and gentlemen, this fund is about almost 30 years old. In this period, there have been 4 chairpersons. All of them have been independent. In my case, much to my regret, on my retirement, I was unable to stay on as a member of the retirement fund because of legal constraints which have since been lifted. Since my retirement, after my retirement, I was appointed as the 4th chairperson. I may also maybe add to that I've got 45 years experience in both the investments and the employee benefits industry. So on to investment. There we are. So this is what it's all about in the case of a retirement fund. If we're able to increase the performance of this fund only by 0.5% a year, on reasonable assumptions, ladies and gentlemen, that will increase your retirement pot by at least 20%. So investment performance is massively important. I'm a passionate believer, being an actuary, in the power of compound interest. I'm not alone. Albert Einstein used to say that the power of compound interest is in fact the 8th wonder of the world. So this is massively important for us. And that's why earlier this year, when we were forced to consider should we become an umbrella fund or should we remain a standalone fund, the primary reason why we decided as trustees that we'd like to remain a standalone fund was the fact that we wanted to have unfettered control over the investment decision-making process. We want to be in a position to make investment decisions quickly. We want to be in a position to invest in alternative investment options, for example, illiquid infrastructure projects which generate higher returns, and private equity likewise. And therefore, it's really, really important for us to be able to control the investment process. We are in the privileged position that not only do we have quite a number of investment specialists on our board as trustees, but we also have on the investment committee, we have 2 really powerful independent investment specialists in the person of Bernard Fuck and Fafa Knutse. Both of them are also actuaries like myself. But on top of that, both of them were consultants, asset investment consultants with Alexander Forbes for quite an extended period. And on top of that, Bernard Fuck was the chief executive of M&G Investments, one of the biggest investment houses in South Africa for 12 years. So we're privileged to have them on board. I'm also happy to report that the investment performance for over the last 10 years has been in excess of 10%. Now, that sounds maybe modest to you, but may I remind you that we are acutely aware of investment risks out there, and we need to balance optimal performance with investment risk. What's more important, ladies and gentlemen, is you should see the 10% plus compound return against the background that over this period, inflation on average was 5.2. So the outperformance of inflation over this period was exactly 5% per year. So in real terms, you've really gone ahead. The second thing, which is as important, is we continuously monitor our performance against our peers, against the alternatives out there. And I'm happy to report, ladies and gentlemen, that over extended periods, I've been a trustee now for 19 years, and we monitor this very carefully. And over this period, we've, on a sustained basis, been in the upper quartile of performance throughout, up to 30 June this year. So there are 5 investment options for you. By far the biggest is the growth portfolio, which is the default strategy. And then the 2 newer ones being number 2 and 3, being the aggressive and conservative portfolios, which were established about 6.5 years ago to provide building blocks for people getting close to retirement. And I'm happy to report that in each of the cases of the first portfolio, the second and the third portfolio, in the respective universes, they've achieved upper quartile performance, which is really great as far as I'm concerned. Now, please allow me a little bit of philosophical debate here, ladies and gentlemen, which is really important from your perspective. Our dream as trustees is that each and every one of you would be able to retire with dignity once you reach retirement age. Now, for that to happen, there are 3 requirements. The first one is we as trustees need to see to it that there is sustained top investment performance. That's our job. But then the other 2, that ball is in your court. The first is that you have to contribute at least 15% of your salary over a period of 35 to 40 years if you hope to retire with dignity. Now, as you may know, when COVID hit us, there was the opportunity, because of cash flow considerations, that members could reduce their contributions down to 5%. We've since encouraged all members to go back up to 15%. Not everybody has done so yet. So I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to reconsider. You have the opportunity end of this year, and I once again want to say, if you don't contribute at least 15%, you are in trouble. I'm happy to say that the receiver allows members to contribute up to 27.5% of their salary on a tax-free basis. And there are many, many, many members, mostly older members, some of them in the audience, who actually do contribute at the level of 27.5%. So that's the second requirement, and that ball's in your court. The third one, ladies and gentlemen, is don't. I repeat, don't. Please don't retire early. More than half of members of the university staff did actually retire early in the last 5 years. The problem with that, ladies and gentlemen, is it's going to hit you when you're in your 70s and your 80s. At that point, more than likely, you'll be unable to find a new job, and then you're in trouble. You'll have to rely on your children, on family, whatever. So please think carefully, ladies and gentlemen, very carefully before you retire early. So that's my main message for this day, I guess. So that's investments. Very, very important, all important in the case of the retirement fund. I mentioned to you that we considered very carefully earlier this year, should we move to an umbrella fund, where in the case of an umbrella fund, it means that we disband the Board of Trustees, we walk away from all the onerous governance and fiduciary responsibilities. We decided not to do that. Our hand was forced to make a decision, ladies and gentlemen. So the background briefly is when this fund started, the administration was done by Alexander Forbes for quite an extended period of almost 20 years. And for the last 8 or 9 years, the administration has been done by Sanlam. Now, Sanlam decided in their wisdom that this type of business was not profitable enough for them. So they sold their book to Alexander Forbes. So that forced us to consider what should we do. And we decided in the end, after very thorough investigation, that we will in fact follow Sanlam's recommendation and move across to Alexander Forbes, which will take place in the course of next year. It'll be after March next year. But you will hopefully not experience any hiccups in this process, and poor Jaapie Kotze will have to work very, very hard to keep the show on the road in terms of the administration. I also do want to talk briefly about the two-pot system, because it's an issue which clearly is a burning issue for many of you. You've read about this in the press. It's due to, with a bit of luck, to be implemented on the 1st of March next year. The two pots will consist of the retirement fund, which you can't touch, and then a savings pot, which you can access from time to time. Now, the sort of latest on that score is that the initial savings pot, the one to which you will have access, will be the smaller of 25,000 Rand and 10% of your fund credit come March or April next year. Now, beware, ladies and gentlemen, there are two caveats on this score. The first is, should you access that money, you will be taxed at your marginal rate of tax on that amount. So don't think if you want to withdraw 5,000, you will have 5,000 in your pocket. More than likely, it'll be like 4,000 or even less. So tax will be levied at your marginal rate. And secondly, because this is an additional admin function, the administrator will levy a certain fee. We're not quite sure what that will amount to yet, but we promise you from our side that we'll keep you posted on this one. You will have adequate warning in terms of what the rules of the game will be. There may even be, if there's a huge rush, which has certain liquidity consequences for the fund, we may even consider like a 2-month sort of waiting period, something like that. But we will before the 1st of March next year, provide you with full information on the implementation of the two-pot system by government on the one hand and by ourselves on the other. Then, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, there's been a benefit survey earlier this year, and I am delighted that you certainly take the fund seriously, in that more than 1,100 of our members actually contributed and gave feedback on the survey. We're in the process. We have a subcommittee looking after that. They will be coming with proposals as to what changes should be made in the case of the pension fund benefits. By and large, you seem to be happy with the package being offered by the pension fund. There are one or two suggestions which we're taking seriously. So we will be fine-tuning the package, notably on the mortality side. In terms of your mortality cover, there seems to be a need for some more flexibility. So this is work in progress. We'll get back to you as soon as we can, but probably not before year-end. Finally, I urge you to visit the SURF website. There's a lot of information, particularly on the investment side. Those of you who are interested in that, some very useful information in terms of the fact sheets and a whole host of other matters. So please feel free to access that. And then also we have an HR Client Service Center where hopefully all your questions can be answered. So thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Good news is news. Thank you, colleague Neil, and to our other speakers, word of thanks and gratitude. Colleagues, we have a few minutes for questions. We will first deal with 4 questions that we did receive beforehand, and thereafter we'll do questions from the floor. And I also, as in the past, indicate that we will, questions that we do not address here, we, under leadership of colleague Mohammed Sheikh, send responses to the people who post the questions. I'll give the first 2 to colleague Stan, and I'll take the second 2.
Thank you very much, Professor Koopman. Our first question was submitted in Afrikaans. I will read it and translate it. Ek sou graag duidelikheid wil hê aangaande die presiese bedrag wat die afgelope boekjaar aan US bouprojekte bestee is en waar die befondsing vandaan gekom het. So the colleague asks for the precise amount spent this year on building projects and how they were funded. The precise answer to that is that we have spent 242 million rand this year on building projects, for which we received 27 million rand in funding from the Department of Higher Education and Training, and the remaining 215 million rand was funded as in my picture previously. You'll recall that grey line at the bottom. These building projects were funded on the right-hand side of my slide from the university's investment portfolio through the capital budget. So that was the first question that I was asked to respond to. The second question was, why must the rector get a house of 30 million rand and other staff members must pay for their own houses and rent? Can't the money be used for students who don't have food? Now, colleagues, sometimes the way you phrase the question leads us in an unhelpful direction. So let me rephrase the question. The university did not buy a house for the rector. The university bought a house for the university. It is a university house. The rector will pay to live in that house from his after-tax income. So a rent will be deducted from the next rector's salary, and by the way, it's not this rector. This rector will remain in his own house. The next rector, whoever that is, will pay to live in the accommodation provided by the university. It is a university asset. So again, back to my picture, this was not bought with the budget of the university, but funded from the investment income on the right-hand side of my slide. It is a capital project. We bought an asset for the university. We do not fund student financial aid from that budget, but we do have very significant financial aid for students, and in fact, our total portfolio of financial aid reaches almost R1 billion. So the university does a tremendous contribution to financial aid, and we do not have to trade these things off against each other. The motivation for buying this house, let me just say one sentence about that. It is a reality that our campus is within an extremely expensive property area, and when we get to select a next rector as a university, we would like the opportunity to invite applicants from all over the country and indeed all over the world. And such a candidate must be able to settle close to the campus and be able to do the work of the rector, which is why very many universities, both in this country and internationally, provide such housing, not free, at a cost to their rector or president. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague Stan. The first question that I will deal with came in Afrikaans, but I'll put it in English. It is a question, how do we deal with instances where we are not respected by colleagues in our environments? And here I can just say to the colleague who posed the question that first of all, know that if you don't experience respect, it is against the values of this university, the e-care values. And then secondly also, colleague Aslam Fattar presented on the Kirkor process. And part of the work that we're doing there and that we try to address is that every Stellenbosch student and employee and partner will have a positive lived experience. And thirdly, we have mechanisms. We have the Employee Relations Division, we have the Equality Unit, where you can really submit official complaints if you have this type of experience. And we really mourn such experiences if you're exposed to that. The second question has to do with bonuses for the rectorate. Why do rectorate members get bonuses and not the rest of the staff? Colleagues, here we can say that council, every time when it appoints a rector, enter into a contract with the rector, and it is the rector who receives then bonuses as head of an institution with high levels of complexities, mandates, and tasks. And specifically, this bonus is paid when institutional and individual targets are met, and the bonus is paid not from the main budget, but from council funds. This practice is in line with practices at other institutions in different sectors of society, and this specific practice advances the recruitment and the retention capacity of the university. Colleagues, with that being said, we open the floor for 2 or 3. We must cut. Yeah, definitely. Colleague Esther wanted to say that this is the rector, not the rectorate. I hope that point came clearly. If you have a question from the floor, a different question, you can show with your hand and identify yourself, and we'll allocate the question to the appropriate rectorate member. I don't see a hand. It seems to me we didn't receive electronic questions. Colleagues, then I see a hand right at the back.
Thank you, Prof. So my question is based on what you just said now.
Can you just identify yourself, colleague?
My name is Anel Mtepa.
Nelite Student Affairs.
Yes. So my question is based on what you just said. Does the university have any plan to implement the 13th check for all its workers across the university?
Can I say, colleagues, I will attempt a first shot. At the moment, no, we don't have a 13th check on the agenda. We do have on the agenda a culture of incentivization, and we have at HR a big list of all the forms of incentives that are practiced at the university. But 13th check is not on the agenda. Colleagues, I don't see more hands. Are there more hands? Please, you can put it and identify yourself. There's a mic.
Hallo prof, ek is meneer Isaacs. Ek wil net weet, ons het in die verlede ons rector toekennings gekry. Ek wil weet, wat is die bedrag van hy rectorstoekenning?
You want to know what the amount is for Rector's Awards?
No. For the staff, you work for that, then you get a rectorstoekenning. So what is the capital against that?
What is
the amount?
Yeah, the amount for the Rector's Awards. I don't have it offhand, but we know we have Rector's Awards for different categories.
No, for the staff.
But we can specifically provide that information to you afterwards. I'll talk to you just now. I don't have it at hand, and I don't think my colleagues at HR will have the amounts for each award. There are Rector's Awards for staff.
Yeah, but for personnel, so 3, zoals ik nou zie.
Yeah, that applies to all staff, but I hear your question that you want the amounts and you want to know for sure what would be applicable to staff in the so-called C3 category. We can provide that to you.
And not for me only?
Yeah, we can provide it to the, by way of communication.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, colleague. Colleague Ilam, is that you in the shade?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Ilam Groenewald, Marty Sport. Prof. Nico, this is not a question, just a plea and an invitation. I don't know how many of our colleagues present here today have visited our beautiful sport facilities, particularly Kutsenberg, Lentulus. It's an invitation to our colleagues to please come and use our facilities. We have 2 entry and exit points called the bridges, but they're open 24 hours. I'm not asking you to do things in the dark, but just to invite you to make use of our beautiful facilities. We're going through difficult times. We don't connect enough with each other, and there are various initiatives out there. And on behalf of Marty Sports, Student Health Services, Prof. Nico, your unit, we are inviting colleagues to recommend different initiatives that can work, and how can we get together and improve the use of our facilities. Lunchtimes, it is too quiet at Kutsenberg, so please, you are all invited. Thank you, Prof. Koopman.
Thank you for that announcement in service of staff well-being. Colleagues, if I have it right, then we can conclude. I think at this point, two themes at this meeting was, we are thriving amidst difficult circumstances. And the second theme, resilience, is the word that we've heard from the COO. It's challenging times, but colleagues, let's tackle it with resilience, met veerkragtigheid, met elasticiteit. We thank you.